King Felipe's emotional address. A heavy winter light settles over the chamber. Marble absorbs sound. Gold leaf reflects history rather than warmth. The air is still, disciplined, expectant. The words land softly, but they carry centuries of weight. A man steps forward, measured, composed, bearing a title older than the state it now serves. King Felipe VI does not rush. He never has. In this space, urgency is a weakness. Continuity is the language. He looks out, not searching for approval, but for alignment. This is not performance. This is presence. And presence, in constitutional monarchy, is power made visible. Spain has heard royal addresses before. Carefully written, carefully timed, often distant, but something is different now. Not in tone alone, but in posture. Shoulders squared not in defiance, but in acceptance. Acceptance of inheritance. Acceptance of consequence. Acceptance that history has arrived again, unannounced, demanding stewardship. This is the living thread of continuity. Because a crown does not speak only for today. It speaks backward, to those who shaped it, and forward, to those who will inherit its silence and its burdens. And when a king allows emotion to surface, controlled, deliberate, restrained, it is never accidental. It is institutional signaling. At first glance, this address appears simple. A father acknowledging uncertainty, a head of state affirming unity. But that reading is incomplete. What matters here is not what is said, but what must be said now, and why it could no longer wait. Spain is not questioning monarchy in loud voices. It is doing something more dangerous. It is questioning relevance quietly. That is the cliffhanger most observers miss. Because constitutional systems do not collapse from rebellion. They erode from indifference, from ritual repeated without belief, from symbols that remain intact while meaning thins. And so the king speaks, not to persuade, but to remind. To remind the nation that continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence. In a man standing where others once stood, bound by rules he did not write, serving a future he will not fully see. Across the Atlantic, analysts in the United States note the restraint. No populist language, no emotional spillover, stability, they conclude. In the United Kingdom, the tone is familiar. They recognize the discipline of a crown that has learned, often painfully, that emotion must serve structure, never replace it. Canada listens through the lens of constitutional inheritance. Australia watches with pragmatic distance. Germany observes with historical sensitivity, aware of how fragile institutional legitimacy can be when memory outpaces renewal. None of them hear weakness. They hear calibration. At 5 minutes in, the phrase returns, deliberately. Father and king. This time, it lands differently. The bridge is clear now. Fatherhood speaks to the future. Kingship binds the present. Holding both at once is not symbolic, it is operational. This is where the stakes deepen. Because succession is not only biological. It is cultural. It is emotional discipline transmitted across generations. A future head of state does not inherit freedom. They inherit restraint. They inherit silence. They inherit the obligation to absorb national anxiety without reflecting it back. And here lies the deeper mystery. What remains unsaid? The address does not name fractures. It does not list threats. It does not acknowledge specific tensions within Spain's political geography. That omission is intentional. Institutions survive by refusing to legitimize volatility with attention. Yet everyone listening understands. Unity is being spoken because unity is under pressure. Responsibility is emphasized because responsibility is being tested. This is not a speech for the crowd. It is a message to the system. By the midpoint, a subtle strain becomes visible, not in voice, but in cadence. A longer pause. A breath held just a fraction longer than protocol demands. It suggests awareness of limits. Not personal limits, institutional ones. What happens when continuity must adapt faster than tradition allows? That question is never asked aloud. It doesn't need to be. 14 minutes in, the point of no return arrives quietly. The king affirms duty not as honor, but as obligation. This distinction matters. Honor is chosen, obligation is inherited, and obligations do not disappear when they become uncomfortable. From this moment forward, there is no path back to symbolic monarchy alone. Visibility has been reasserted, presence has been demanded, the crown has stepped closer to the public line, not to cross it, but to hold it. Observers abroad register the shift. Not alarm, recognition. Institutions signaling longevity often do so by tightening, not expanding. By clarifying roles, not softening them. At 19 minutes, the future casts its shadow. Not as threat, but as question. How will the next generation interpret this balance? How will national identity be woven into rituals that must speak to citizens who no longer remember why they were created? The king does not answer. He cannot. That answer belongs to time. In the final moments, the chamber feels larger, quieter. The words slow. The silence between them grows heavier. And then, once more, with intention and restraint, the phrase is spoken again. Not as a slogan, as a condition. The address ends without resolution. As it should, because institutions that claim certainty invite collapse. Those that acknowledge uncertainty, and still stand, earn endurance. The crown remains. The questions remain. And history, patient as ever, waits to see whether continuity will be strong enough to carry what comes next. The silence after the address does not disperse. It lingers. In palaces, silence is never empty. It is evaluative. Behind closed doors, aides do not ask whether the words were moving. They ask whether they were sufficient. Whether the balance was held. Whether the institution spoke clearly enough without speaking too much. Because in constitutional monarchy, excess is risk, and absence is erosion. King Felipe VI understands this better than most. He was shaped by rupture before he was shaped by ritual. He watched a crown regain legitimacy not through force, but through restraint. Through the long discipline of not answering every challenge, not reacting to every provocation. That memory governs every sentence he chooses now. What the public hears as emotion is, internally, governance. Emotion deployed with boundaries. Vulnerability allowed only where it strengthens trust, never where it weakens authority. This is not contradiction. It is craft. The address is studied abroad with similar precision. In Washington, it is read as a stabilizing signal in a Europe still recalibrating its political center. In London, the subtext is unmistakable. The crown must be seen, but never seen grasping. Canada notes the reaffirmation of constitutional clarity. Australia hears continuity without nostalgia. Germany hears an institution conscious of its historical responsibility to remain bounded by law. These reactions matter, not because they influence Spain, but because they reflect it. Global confidence in a monarchy is not sentimental. It is institutional credit, and credit, once lost, is almost impossible to recover. What deepens tension now is not scandal or spectacle, but timing. This address did not emerge from crisis alone. It emerged from anticipation, from an understanding that waiting until pressure becomes rupture is already too late. This is the quiet recalibration phase. National identity is woven into these rituals, but rituals only endure when they speak to the present. The king's words are therefore aimed not only at today's citizens, but at tomorrow's inheritors of the state, those who will judge whether continuity felt alive or merely preserved. The crown does not belong to the past. It borrows legitimacy from it. That distinction is crucial. Inside the institution, this moment is logged not as an emotional address, but as a marker. A point where visibility increased, where language softened without surrendering structure, where the monarchy acknowledged complexity without conceding authority. Nothing outwardly changes. That is the point, because the most consequential shifts in power are often invisible at first. They occur in tone, in timing, in what is chosen to be said, and what is deliberately left unsaid. And as Spain absorbs the echo of this address, one truth becomes unavoidable. Continuity is no longer being assumed. It is being actively defended. Time moves differently after such moments. Public attention drifts, headlines thin, commentators turn to louder subjects. But inside the institution, time compresses. Every gesture that follows is measured against what has just been said. Because when a monarch allows controlled emotion into the public record, it creates expectation. Not of repetition, but of coherence. The next silence must align with the last word spoken. This is where pressure quietly accumulates. Spain's constitutional architecture was designed to endure tension, not eliminate it. The crown sits above daily politics, but it cannot float above national mood. It must register it without absorbing it. That balance is narrowing, not dangerously, yet, but perceptibly. King Felipe VI knows that legitimacy today is not inherited once. It is renewed continuously. Each generation demands evidence that institutions still recognize them, even when those institutions refuse to mirror them. This is the paradox now confronting the monarchy. Visibility is required, but familiarity is forbidden. The crown must be present without becoming ordinary. Human without becoming casual. Emotional without becoming reactive. The address opened a door. It did not step through it. What follows is restraint amplified. Fewer words. Sharper symbolism. Appearances calibrated not for warmth, but for steadiness. In this phase, absence would be misread as withdrawal. Excess would be read as insecurity. Across Europe, this posture is understood instinctively. In the United Kingdom, it echoes a lesson learned over decades. When the crown explains itself too much, it weakens the spell that keeps it intact. Germany, shaped by institutional collapse and living memory, recognizes the warning signs of overexposure. The United States, watching from a system built on constant visibility, finds the discipline almost foreign, but reassuring. Canada and Australia interpret the moment through continuity rather than sentiment. For them, the crown is not a personality. It is a stabilizing abstraction. What matters is not whether the king is liked, but whether the system feels anchored. That is the deeper tension now. Anchors hold best when unseen. But when currents shift, they must be checked. Within Spain, the public response is restrained. No surge, no backlash, something more ambiguous. Reflection, debate without fever. That, too, is information. Institutions learn not only from noise, but from its absence. This phase is where continuity is either reinforced, or quietly hollowed. Because if emotional truth is acknowledged once, it cannot be denied later. The monarchy has signaled that it hears the undercurrent. Now it must prove that hearing does not lead to drift. There is no announcement of change. No reform unveiled. No concession offered. Instead, there is consistency. The same protocols. The same distances. The same rituals, now subtly reframed by what has already been said. This is deliberate. Continuity survives not by reacting, but by absorbing pressure without altering shape. Yet beneath the surface, one question persists, unanswered and growing heavier. How long can restraint alone satisfy a society that increasingly measures legitimacy through transparency rather than tradition? That question is not for this moment. It is for the one approaching. By now, the institution has settled into watchfulness. Not defensiveness. Watchfulness. This is the phase where nothing dramatic is permitted to happen, because everything is being assessed. What matters is not the speech itself anymore, but its afterlife. Every formal appearance that follows is read against it. Every silence is compared to it. The monarchy is not reacting publicly, but internally it is recalibrating how continuity must now be demonstrated, not assumed. King Felipe VI remains deliberately unchanged in form. Same composure, same distance, same discipline. That, too, is messaging. The institution is signaling that emotional truth has been acknowledged, not unleashed. This distinction is critical, because once a crown is perceived as responding emotionally to pressure, it enters a cycle it cannot win. Expectations escalate, demands personalize, authority becomes negotiable. The address avoided that trap. It humanized the role without surrendering the role. Inside the state, this is understood as a protective maneuver. Spain's system does not require a beloved monarch. It requires a credible one. Credibility is built not on warmth, but on predictability. On the assurance that the institution will still be standing tomorrow, unchanged by today's turbulence. International observers continue to read the moment carefully. In London, there is recognition of a familiar tightrope: speak once, clearly, then retreat into formality. In Washington, the restraint is interpreted as institutional maturity. Germany sees a constitutional actor respecting the limits of symbolic power. Canada and Australia note the absence of improvisation. No deviation from script, no personalization of the state. This is how institutional trust is preserved across borders. Yet the pressure has not disappeared. It has relocated. It now sits in the future rather than the present. In succession rather than speech. In whether the next generation will be able to embody restraint in a world that rewards exposure. This is where the address quietly shifts meaning. It stops being about reassurance and becomes about preparation. Preparation for a political climate less patient with silence. Less reverent toward inherited authority. More insistent on visibility, explanation, access. The crown cannot fully meet those demands without ceasing to be what it is. And so the strategy becomes endurance through clarity. Not adapting the institution to every moment, but clarifying what it will never become. This is the edge now being walked. No rupture, no resolution, just the steady weight of continuity pressing forward, aware that the next test will not arrive with warning, and that when it does, restraint will once again be the first line of defense. The system holds. For now, the moment passes, but its significance does not. In institutions built to outlast individuals, conclusions are never declared. They are inferred. The address now belongs to the record. Not as an emotional deviation, but as a calibrated adjustment. A reminder that continuity survives not by silence alone, but by knowing precisely when silence must be broken. King Felipe VI returns to form, and in That return lies the final message. The crown has not changed course. It has clarified its bearings. Fatherhood acknowledged. Kingship reaffirmed. The balance held, not resolved. For Spain, this is neither reassurance nor warning. It is orientation, a signal of where the institution stands as pressures accumulate beyond the palace walls. The monarchy is not seeking intimacy with the public. It is offering stability to it. Abroad, the reading settles into consensus. In the United States, steadiness is interpreted as credibility. In the United Kingdom, restraint is read as survival instinct. Canada and Australia recognize continuity without nostalgia. Germany sees a constitutional actor respecting the boundary between symbolism and power. These perceptions matter because legitimacy today is international as well as domestic. Institutions are judged not only by their citizens, but by the systems that must work alongside them. And still, nothing is concluded. Because the future test of the crown will not resemble this moment. It will arrive differently, through generational change, through political realignment, through demands that cannot yet be named. This address does not answer those challenges. It positions the institution to meet them. Continuity is not guaranteed. It is maintained, reaffirmed, defended quietly, often invisibly, until the day it must be proven again. That day has not arrived. But it is closer now. And the crown stands, watchful, at the edge of what comes next.